You've talked about the enormous potential in India, and I think everyone in this room knows full well that a population already 1.3 billion strong, it's going to be 1.7 billion, it's going to be the third largest economy in the world. We know that the long-term potential in India is wonderful. The truth is the long-term potential has always been great, the trouble is getting there. And in my 5 years living in India, again and again I heard people talk about the long-term potential and then complain about the short-term problems. So I'm going to throw some short-term problems at you and see whether you're a believer that these things will be solved. When I arrived in India in 2010, I met the finance minister of the day, a man called Prathap, and he told me that the GST, the goods and services tax, would be in place within a year. That was in 2010. When I interviewed Mr. Modi last year, he said it would be in place by April this year, and it's not. So do you believe, for example, this really landmark piece of legislation, the goods and services tax, will be brought in to create a single market for India that then Swedish companies can benefit from?
I do believe that India, if India wants to be as successful as they say they want to be, and looking at the progress the government says they want to take, this is a very important step on the road. I think this is acknowledged in India, and this is for sure acknowledged by Swedish companies doing business in India. So I think India and all countries have the business community's eyes on it, looking, are you doing what you're saying you should do? And I think this is one of the things that the Indian government has promised to do and will have to deliver if it wants to see this kind of progressive economic development for the future.
What about internationally? When Mr. Modi came to office a couple of years ago, one of the first global statements he made was on trade, and those of us in The Economist thought it was a bit regressive, that he was not being very in favour of free trade at the time. I think he's improved his position since then, but I'm wondering whether you think there will be a free trade deal between the European Union and India in any time in the near future, and if not, why not? What are the blockages to getting a better trade deal between these two massive blocs?
First of all, the Swedish position is very clear. We're a free trading country, and I think the experience from Sweden is that we wouldn't have been as successful on global market without this openness to global trade. I don't think we would have been a front runner when it comes to innovation unless we met global competition head on also in Sweden. So I think this is one of the key aspects of why Sweden is where we are today, is our openness to trade. Of course, I hope that there will be a free trade agreement between Europe and India, but to be honest, there is no negotiation taking place right now. So of course it will not happen in a short period of time. But once again, I say this to all countries that are also hesitating on global trade and wants to take the next step when it comes to innovation and competitiveness. I think you cannot skip this part. Unless you open up your country to trade, you will not be a strong partner in global value chains. You will not meet the competition that other players are putting up on the global market. So I think India will have to take this next step. I hope they will take it sooner than later, because I think now there is also a possibility to take some perhaps position in the global debate on trade, because we see some protectionism growing in several places around the world. And I think this could be a real threat to the global economy unless we keep the economy open and continue to trade with each other.
Okay, well that's a pretty clear message. I think one that others will take to heart. Also, I was struck to see the mention there of IKEA. My wife is Norwegian, and when we got to India in 2010, she was very excited because IKEA was going to open, we thought, and we'd be able to get Swedish meatballs and good Nordic food. Well, it took a while, but I think the first IKEA store is going to open in Hyderabad, I think, this year. Do you think that when one big Swedish company gets in there, and I know there are others also there, but when you get a really big global brand like IKEA going in, it'll encourage others to follow on its coattails? Does it make it much easier to have one champion in there in the first place?
Yes, this is our experience, at least. When the global players the big global companies from Sweden enters a market, it will affect other companies looking at that market, because then you get the experience, you get also someone to talk about the problems, the worries that you have, and you can now actually understand how they solve the questions or how they're moving forward. I think IKEA is one part of the Swedish business community that really can pave the way for other Swedish firms globally.
You mentioned in your talk the talent, the skills that exist in India, and I know that the United States, the tech sector in the United States, has sucked in huge numbers of engineers, especially from southern states in India. Andhra Pradesh, Telangana has produced a very large number of migrants who've gone to the Bay Area, and if you look at the US visas, the H-1B visas, a very large proportion are now taken by Indians. That said, India's education system is patchy. There are parts of it that are wonderful and parts of it that are not. And it's not always clear that there's a sufficient flow of really high-skilled labor in India to fulfill all the jobs that are needed to be filled. Do you think there is a future for drawing in highly educated Indian workers, for example, to work in the tech sector in Sweden?
We see that already, not the numbers that the United States have because they're a bigger country, but when you look at what countries that actually what skilled workers that actually come to Sweden, India is up in the top to Sweden as well. So yes, we see this already, and I think this questions on skills and knowledge will be a crucial question for all countries that want to compete on a global scale. So this is a very highly debated question in Sweden. How can we actually attract even more people from abroad coming to Sweden to be part of the testbed Sweden or the tech wonder of Stockholm or Gothenburg or Malmö? But I think all countries will have to think about how do we actually build an educational system that is really getting all the talent out of the population, but also regain competence during the lifelong learning process, especially when you look at the economy going more digital and perhaps jobs are changing so much faster in the future than today. I think the system of lifelong learning will be even more important. And we're actually looking in the export strategy of Sweden, how do we actually can make it easier to come to Sweden and work? Because we see that it sometimes takes too long to get permits and to get everything clear. Even people that are invested in Swedish companies here have had problems getting to stay here, and this is not a good situation. So this is a priority in the export strategy of Sweden to actually stay open, also in this area.
I want to touch on the fourth industrial revolution. You again mentioned that in your talk. I'm a little bit skeptical about Make in India. I know that it's a very grand idea that India should follow the path that China's taken, that East Asia has taken, and go for this route of being the sort of the workshop of the world, the back workshop in a sense, where India could be a great manufacturing power. I fear that because of the fourth industrial revolution, because of 3D manufacturing, all the new innovations that are coming in manufacturing, that the space that's open for a country like India to survive and to grow by doing low-skilled manufacturing, that space is closing, and that it may be misplaced to go for a big manufacturing strategy, and that India might be smarter going down another route. What do you think? Is there scope for different sorts of manufacturing? Can India still pick up on the Chinese-style mass textiles, low-skill manufacturing, or should it be aiming for something much higher?
There's two questions in one there, because first of all, is manufacturing important? Yes, I think it is. There was kind of a sentiment in many Western European countries that manufacturing was not as important for the economy. We had that in debate in UK, for instance, and after a while they have to change their mind because they couldn't build their economy only on finance and services, so they produce a strategy for their industry. We see United States having a strategy for their development of industry. We see the Netherlands, Sweden has produced our own smart industry. But it will not be the same industry as before. So of course, if India thinks that the industry will continue to be as it was before, this will not happen. It will change. The demand on development, investments, digitalization, automation, this will increase all over the world. And I see possible from a Swedish perspective to actually get involved in this, to actually perhaps get some of the investment that actually went out of Sweden because of high wages, to come back to Sweden, because we're good at producing and we have a high-skilled workforce. But India also has a high-skilled workforce. They're also very into some of the sectors that are very relevant in this kind of modern industrial landscape. So I think it's not only about scale of Make India, it's also what you do of it and where do you want to compete.
I mean, that touches immediately on the most sort of politically sensitive issue for anyone thinking about the economy within India, which is how do you create jobs? Huge numbers of young people, by one estimate, about 1 million a month need to find jobs. If you're not doing mass-scale manufacturing, India's going to struggle to create enough jobs for all those people. On the other hand, if they do create jobs for all those people, there's an enormous growing economy there, a market to tap. So a final question for you. If you were to imagine 2030 Swedish companies investing in India, do you imagine them investing mostly in the sorts of areas where they're going to be manufacturing and producing stuff there, or are they mostly getting in there in order to sell to the market that's there in India?
I don't think, as a minister, I should decide what the companies are doing, what kind of business they do in 10 or 15 years' time or 20 years. I don't think I'm the right person to ask. But I think, for a Swedish perspective, I think they see the potential in the growing market as well as being a partner in a modern industry sector in India, because it doesn't matter if you talk about life science, the transportation system, the smart cities, or manufacturing. I think Swedish companies will look at every part of this to see where can we fit in. And as I mentioned in my speech, I think the transformation that India is undertaking now and wants to undertake, I think the competence and profile of Swedish companies fits that very well, because there is often more cheap products on the market. But if you really want to make the transformation, if you really want to be a global player, you have to aim for what's actually the really best, but also sustainable way. And I think that's more clear in India than in any other country in the world, because if you do not make it sustainable now, it will be unsustainable for your population in 10 or 15 or 20 years' time.
Okay, well, I think, unless people to say, no, I think we're being told to wrap up. I was going to see if people on the floor wanted to throw you questions, but democracy will come another time. Well, thank you very much, Minister, and
thank you
again. Thank you.